All right, next we're moving on to the peripheral nervous system. The peripheral nervous system is going to include spinal nerves, which originate from the spinal cord, and cranial nerves that originate from the brain. The spinal nerves, occur in 31 pairs. Each pair receives information from a specific part of the body. All are going to carry both sensory and motor fibers. Sensory fibers are going to enter the dorsal side of the spine in a bundle called a dorsal root. Axons and other motor neurons are going to leave the ventral side of the spinal cord in a bundle called the ventral root. The cranial nerves occur in 12 pairs. They're going to service the structures of the head and certain body parts, including the heart and diaphragm. Some only carry sensory fibers, while others will carry only motor fibers, and still others are going to carry both types of fibers. Here's a diagram. Spend just a little bit of time looking at how these pairs come into and go out of both the spinal cord in the peripheral nervous system.
This view of the underside of the brain reveals the 12 cranial nerves, which carry sensory and motor information to and from the brain. Cranial Nerve 1, the olfactory nerve, carries sensory information about smell from receptors in the nose. Cranial Nerve 2 is the optic nerve. It conducts sensory information from the eye to the brain. Cranial Nerve 3, the ocular motor, is a motor nerve that controls the contraction and relaxation of the eye muscles. Cranial Nerve 4, the trochlear nerve, also controls eye muscle function. Cranial Nerve 5, the trigeminal nerve, controls the muscles of the jaw and carries sensory information from the face. Cranial Nerve 6, the abducens nerve, is a motor nerve that controls muscles of the eye. Cranial Nerve 7, the facial nerve, controls facial muscles and carries sensory information from the tongue. Cranial Nerve 8, the vestibulocochlear nerve, carries sensory information from the ear. Cranial Nerve 9, the glossopharyngeal nerve, contains sensory and motor fibers that project to and from the pharynx. Cranial Nerve 10, the vagus, controls the functions of the internal organs. Cranial Nerve 11, the spinal accessory nerve, controls the muscles of the neck and back. Finally, Cranial Nerve 12, the hypoglossal, controls the muscles in the tongue. This figure depicts several segments of the human spinal cord. The spinal cord transmits messages to and from the brain and acts as a reflex center. The white matter is composed of myelinated nerve tracts that allow communication between various regions of the brain and spinal cord. The gray matter contains neuronal cell bodies and dendrites. It forms the central region of the spinal cord. Sensory fibers from the periphery enter the spinal cord through the dorsal root, and motor fibers exit the spinal cord through the ventral root. The dorsal root ganglion contains the cell bodies of sensory neurons. Spinal nerves contain both motor and sensory fibers, and each serves a specific region of the body. This view of the underside of the brain reveals the 12 cranial nerves. The autonomic nervous system consists of two branches, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic divisions. The nerves of the parasympathetic division emerge from the brainstem, cranial nerves, and from the sacral segment of the spinal cord. The sympathetic nerves emerge from the spinal cord through the thoracic and lumbar segments. Both the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous systems send nerve fibers to most, but not all, internal organs. The cell bodies of autonomic neurons are found in a series of ganglia located outside the CNS. In the sympathetic division, most of these ganglia are located in a chain just outside the spinal column. In the parasympathetic nervous system, the ganglia are located closer to the target organs. These post-ganglionic neurons of the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system are innervated by preganglionic neurons that are located within the brainstem and spinal cord. When both systems send nerves to a given organ, They have opposite or antagonistic effects on its function. If one system stimulates, the other system inhibits. The antagonistic effects are brought about by different neurotransmitters. Whereas sympathetic neurons release mostly norepinephrine at their target organs, parasympathetic neurons release acetylcholine at their target organs. In general, the sympathetic nervous system is most active during a crisis, for example, the fight or flight response, while the parasympathetic nervous system is most active during visceral functions, permitting the organism to digest food and build up metabolic resources during periods of rest.